In this video, I'm going to show you how to set up your iPhone camera to shoot the best photos and the best videos. One of the key camera settings on your iPhone for getting the best quality photos and videos is choosing between high efficiency and most compatible. High efficiency is what I use because you get the same quality, but the files are smaller and therefore they're less demanding on your phone's storage. High efficiency saves your photos in the HEIF format, and this is more advanced and more efficient than the standard old JPEG. But the downside is that some platforms and some apps don't allow you to upload in this format. For example, if you try to upload an HEIF photo to Reddit, it's not going to let you. But if you share directly from your iPhone to Reddit or other platforms, iOS automatically converts these photos to the good old common JPEG. So you might think about choosing most compatible here instead. And then your photos are going to be saved as JPEG files directly, and that's, much more universally compatible. However, there are trade-offs because your videos are going to be saved with the older, less efficient H.264 codec instead of the modern HEVC, or otherwise known as H.265 codec. And as well, if you want to record Dolby Vision HDR, this is only possible using the high-efficiency H.265 codec. Now, unfortunately, the iPhone's iOS doesn't let you set photo and video formats independently. Whichever one of these you choose is going to be applied to both photo and video formats together. So this means that if you want to shoot high efficiency video, but save your photos as JPEG, you're going to need to toggle between the setting manually each time. So obviously nobody is actually going to do that. But here is a little tip. So you can actually have your iPhone convert HEIF photos to JPEGs when you send them via AirDrop. So after you tap the AirDrop button, before you send, just tap Options and then choose Most Compatible. When the photo arrives at its destination, it's going to be converted to the JPEG. So it's not a perfect solution, but it might help you out in some cases. Now bear in mind that some photo editing features in your iPhone are only available for photos shot using the HEIF format. For example, if you want to edit style and tone. So all that considered, my overall advice is just to choose high efficiency here. Unless basically you just want an easier life and you're not bothered about your files being smaller or the loss of certain features. Dolby Vision was introduced to iPhones by Apple over 5 years ago now. But despite that, we rarely see iPhone videos shared on social media in Dolby Vision. And I'm one of those people who doesn't use it. But if you go to record video in the camera settings, you're going to find an HDR video switch, and this is going to be turned on by default if you have a new iPhone. So Dolby Vision is a high dynamic range video format that dynamically adjusts brightness, color, and contrast, and it does that on a scene by scene or frame by frame basis. And this then delivers kind of more vivid images. And all these adjustments are customized depending on the monitor that it's playing on. Now, there's a few reasons why I keep it switched off. So the first one is that you need a compatible display to see the full benefit. So that really adds a level of uncertainty about how your footage is going to look to most viewers. So my second reason is that it adds this complexity when you come to editing because you have to work in an HDR color space. So that does make it pretty tricky to mix Dolby Vision video with non-Dolby Vision video. So this video is shot and edited in a regular standard dynamic range format. So that means that I can't show you the difference in look between Dolby Vision and regular video. You can't mix them. But if I did decide to make this a Dolby Vision video, I wouldn't be able to use any of my old standard video footage. So my final reason is that I'm not even sure if I actually like the look of it. Dolby Vision's extra kind of zing can sometimes look brighter and more digital compared to traditional film aesthetics, which usually favors a lower brightness range and a softer contrast, and that all creates a more organic or filmic feel. That said, I do occasionally see a Dolby Vision video pop up on Instagram or YouTube, so if you like the look, go ahead and keep this switched on. The thing is that when you're editing, you can usually convert HDR footage to SDR footage pretty easily. So if you do record some by accident, or you want to use it in a project that isn't, Dolby Vision with other footage that's SDR, you don't have to throw it away, you can just convert it. In camera settings, under formats, there's a photo capture setting. So set that to 24 megapixels for the highest resolution. Next, we want to toggle on ProRes and resolution control. And this is going to open up our RAW settings. So tap those, and here I recommend that you choose JPEG XL Lossy. The JPEG XL Lossless is the highest quality, but it does create the bigger files. And in practice, it's really hard to see that there's any difference in quality between the lossy and the lossless. So we may as well just choose the lossy. Okay, now open the camera app and switch to photo mode, and in the corner you're going to find the camera settings button. So tap to open it. If you want to shoot 48 megapixel photos instead of the default 24 megapixel photos, tap where it says 48 megapixel. Using these settings, we can also switch to RAW, and notice that when you switch to RAW, the megapixel options change from 24 megapixel and 48 megapixel to 12 megapixel and 48 megapixel. And this just means that you've got the option of the full sensor RAW or this scaled down 12 megapixel RAW. Now, if you don't plan on editing any of your photos, you generally don't need to shoot in RAW. RAW files just give you a lot more image information and flexibility for adjusting color and tone. But they are much larger, and they do require editing software to make the most of them. So if you're someone who's going to take their photos into an app like Lightroom or Photoshop and make major edits, then RAW is for you. But if you're happy with how they look as they are, or you just want to make some minor edits using the iPhone Photos app, then you're not going to need this big RAW file. In photo mode, tap the 1x button and you can see that it changes to 28mm from 24mm. Tap again and it's going to switch to 35mm. You can see that it zooms in each time and then it zooms back out again for 24mm. And these are what we call focal lengths. But the lens isn't changing. What's happening is that the iPhone is cropping in on the image. And whatever it's set to here, you're going to get the same number of pixels and detail in the image. So for that reason, it's not quite the same as cropping in on your photos after you've taken them. It's really just a way to easily and quickly reframe a photo without losing any quality. Go into camera settings, scroll down a little bit, and you're going to see the photo capture heading. And below that, it says Fusion Camera. Open that and you can now toggle off the 28mm and the 35mm. So if you want to remove this feature entirely, you can just toggle them both off. Or maybe you just want the main camera to switch between 24 and 35. So in that case, you can toggle off 28. You can also change the default camera. So for example, if you find yourself using the 35mm crop the most, then you can just set this to the default. And it'll always be set to that when you open the camera app. Press the camera control button to open the camera app. Press again to use the control as a shutter or a record button. Now, like with the regular shutter button, in photo mode, pressing and holding is going to start a quick video recording. Press gently on the control until you feel a click. That opens up the camera control island. Now, if you find that gentle pressing is a little bit tricky, you can make a long slide across the button instead. If we do a light press and hold, the camera locks exposure and focus. And this is going to remain as long as you continue the light press. When you release your finger, it's going to go back to auto mode. Slide your finger over the camera control to adjust whatever setting you're on. In this case, I can switch cameras. So press gently twice on the camera control so that you can feel it click twice. And that's going to open up a menu of different settings. Slide your finger on the camera control and choose a setting. Another gentle press is going to select it, or you can just wait for it to be selected. And now slide your finger on the camera control again to adjust the setting. And actually the island itself can also be used to change settings by sliding your finger. Now if you find it you keep accidentally pressing the camera control button and opening the camera, go into settings, camera control, and then choose double click. So this means that you need to double click the camera button to open the camera. So that's going to prevent you, most of the time anyway, opening it by accident. The other option is to disable the button from opening the camera. Now, in camera control settings, tap camera at the top, and now you can choose which app the camera control button opens. For example, I could choose the Blackmagic Camera app instead. Or if you go to the bottom and then choose none, and then the button isn't going to open any apps at all. Once a camera app is open, you can still use the control. So once you just open a camera app using the iPhone interface, you can then still use the camera control. It's just that the button isn't going to open anything once you set it like this. If you're someone who puts your iPhone in a clamp, like on a tripod or on a gimbal, you might find that the clamp triggers the camera control button and it starts recording when you don't want it to. In which case you will probably want to switch off the camera control completely. Go into camera control settings, scroll to the bottom and tap on accessibility. At the top you're going to find a master control button. So just toggle that off and the camera control button will no longer respond. Here you can actually customize how your camera control button does respond. The graphic in the middle of the screen lights up when you light press, so you can practice and adjust the settings until it feels right. If you have require screen on enabled, then pressing the camera button only opens the camera when the screen is on. So it's going to be one click to turn on the screen and then another click to open the camera. But that said, if you have set it to double click, as I showed you a little bit earlier, then double clicking is just going to open the camera even with the screen off. If you toggle off camera adjustments, the camera control button now just works as a button to open your camera or start virtual intelligence. But you can also customize which controls you have and which order they're in. Tap customize and at the top you can switch off the light press or the swipe, or you can just switch them both off. Below are the controls. Tap the blue tick to enable or disable each control. Tap and hold the 3 bars and then drag to a new position, and this is going to change their position in the camera control menu. At the bottom you can toggle off the clean preview, and with this off, settings will remain on screen as you use the camera control to make adjustments. Now if you don't want holding a light press to lock exposure and focus, then you can toggle this off to disable the feature. Double light press the camera control and select styles. You can now swipe through various different looks which you can then apply to your photos. So this is just a very quick and easy way to adjust the mood of your photos. Double light press again and then select tone. This setting basically controls the darkness of the shadows. Now, although tone adjusts the brightness of an image, it isn't actually an exposure setting. So if we set tone lower, the shadows are going to get darker, and the image as a whole is going to contain more contrast. If we set tone higher, the shadows are going to be lighter, and the frame as a whole is going to have less contrast. But if we want to make the whole image lighter or darker by changing exposure, instead we can just use the EV setting, and that stands for exposure value. The cool thing is that these style and tone settings are actually non-destructive. So if you open up your image in the Photos app and then tap Edit, you can go to the style and tone setting and now you can change it for a different look if you didn't like how it turned out. And you can also go back to just the basic standard look. Each of these settings is actually customizable using this control feature. If you slide your finger around, you can fine tune and then you can use the slider to adjust how much of this look you actually want to apply. So what you're doing here is you're changing these 3 settings above the photo: tone, color, and palette. Palette is actually controlled by the amount slider. Now if you move your finger up and down, you're controlling tone, and sliding left and right is going to control the color. And if you want to reset one of these presets, you can just tap the circular arrow. Now you can actually only edit the style and tone of a photo if it was shot in the HEIF format, which is the more efficient format that we talked about at the beginning. And if you shoot your photos in the JPEG format, when you capture a photo using one of these styles, the look is going to be baked in and you're not going to be able to edit it. If you want your iPhone camera to remember these settings for next time, go to Preserve Settings again and then toggle on Photographic Style. As well, if you want to set one of these styles as a default for your camera, so it's always going to use it unless you set it not to, then go to Camera Settings, photographic styles, and then swipe to choose a style. Let's just choose amber and then set amber. And now when I open the camera app in photo mode, the camera is going to use that style automatically as a default. Using the main wide camera, the iPhone can now record from 24 frames per second up to 120 frames per second in 4K resolution. In the camera app, switch to video and then open the video settings by tapping them. Now 24 frames per second is basically the movie look frame rate. It's what we're used to when we watch movies and TV dramas. But just switching to it isn't necessarily going to give you good results, because with a fast shutter speed, you don't get the smooth cinematic motion blur. So in daylight, the only way to get a slow shutter speed is to use ND filters. 30 frames per second is the most commonly used frame rate, and it's kind of pretty close to the film look. And as well, having a fast shutter speed is less of a problem. You don't quite notice it as much. But if you do want nice cinematic looking motion in your video, you should think about adding an ND filter even at 30 frames per second. 60 frames per second creates very smooth looking video, and shutter speed is even less of an issue. You're probably not going to be worried about it too much. But most people use this frame rate for creating slow motion. So 120 frames per second, that's obviously twice as many frames per second as 60 frames per second. And really the only reason for shooting this frame rate is to use it for extra dramatic slow motion. When you switch to 120 frames per second, you'll notice that the ultra-wide and the telephoto selectors are gone, and that's because you can only shoot 120 frames per second with the main camera. Recording 120 frames per second video works differently depending on which mode you record in. If you record in the regular video mode, it's going to play back at normal speed unless you edit it. But if you record in the slow motion mode, it's going to play back in slow motion. So personally, I record 120 frames per second in the regular video mode, and then I can edit it either in the Photos app or in my editing software. But if you do go into the slow motion mode, you can also choose 240 frames per second. But this is going to be limited to 1080p resolution. Now, if you want to turn your high frame rate video into slow motion, you can just open it in the Photos app on your iPhone, tap the settings button at the bottom, and at the top, you're going to see a button which looks like a dial or a clock. So just tap that to open a playback speed menu, and now you can select the speed at which you want the video to play back. So with this 120 frames per second clip, if I select 25%, then that means I'm going to be converting the video to 30 frames per second. At the bottom, we now have this slow motion position selector. So the portion of the line which has more vertical lines is the normal speed, and where the lines are kind of more spread out, this is where the slow motion kicks in. So you can slide these points around to change the position. So if you just want the whole video to be in slow motion, slide the points as far as they can go to each end. But you can also be creative here. If you pick a key moment in the video where you want the slow motion to kick in and then return to a regular speed after the sort of dramatic moment has passed, then this can actually look pretty cinematic. And finally, just click done at the top. When you share this clip, the slow motion effect is going to be baked in. Now, when you open the video or photo settings in the camera app, you might have noticed these small dots beside some of the settings. So these actually indicate your default settings. So when you open your camera app, it will always default back to these settings. Now, if we go into camera settings and then record video, we can choose which are our default settings. And personally, I have mine set to 4K and 30 frames per second. And if you want to include PAL settings here, toggle that on, and you're now going to get the 25 frames per second option as well. So you just tap it, and then you get a little blue tick beside it, and then when you go back into the main camera, it's always going to open up into those settings. Now, if you decide to use a third-party camera app, like Blackmagic for example, and you want to learn more about camera settings, I've got a whole course that's dedicated to mastering any camera app. And this covers all the key settings, like shutter speed, ISO, white balance, and plenty more. So head over to Patreon if you're interested in that. And as always, there's going to be links in the description of the video to everything that I talk about in this video. Now, regular iPhone stabilization is usually enough for most situations, but if you do want this kind of extra smooth footage, or you're recording while you're running or something, then you can boost the stabilization up a notch. If you go into the record video menu and then scroll down to enhanced stabilization. So if you have this toggled on, you're going to get more stable footage, but it's going to be at the cost of a little bit of a loss of pixels, because this is digital stabilization, so that means that your iPhone needs to crop into the image a little bit. Now, if you open up your camera, there's a second option called action mode. So we tap the button to open up our options, and we're going to find this action mode button, which looks like a person running. So if we just tap that, and that's going to enable action mode, and you're going to see that the resolution is now limited to 2.8K. So again, we're sacrificing quality or pixels for extra stabilization. As well, in low light, you're probably going to get a message that says more light required. And the thing about digital stabilization is that it needs a clear image. And that means you actually want less motion blur and less digital noise. So getting this extra smooth stabilization actually conflicts with trying to get that film look with the ND filters to slow the shutter speed. Now, back in the record video menu below enhanced stabilization, you're going to find a setting for this action mode, specifically action mode lower light. So if you have this switched on, when you use action mode and there's not enough light, the iPhone is going to reduce the amount of stabilization and instead focus more on retaining the quality of the video. But if you actually want the best quality videos, then you're probably not going to use action mode anyway. Apple ProRes on the iPhone is a professional level video codec designed for capturing high quality, richly detailed video footage that gives you more flexibility in post-production. So this is like in between your regular video codec and the Apple ProRes RAW. You get big files and you get lots of color information and image information, but you're not going to get as much as Apple ProRes RAW. That said, it's slightly more convenient when it comes to capturing it, and also you're going to get smaller files. So ProRes retains more color information and less compression, which means your videos are going to hold up better when you want to adjust colors and exposure while editing. So in camera settings, go to formats and enable ProRes. Open up your camera app and then switch to video mode. And now in the corner, open quality settings by tapping them, and you can see that ProRes is available with two options. We've got log or HDR, and this means that when you shoot ProRes, you've got to choose between Apple log or Dolby Vision. And when you choose, you're going to see that the format is displayed in the corner, along with how much video you can record with this settings. And if you have low storage like me, at the top you're going to see a message to free resources. So tap this, and then any storage that's taken up by temporary files is going to be deleted to make room. And after that, you're going to see storage settings at the top. So tapping that takes you to your iPhone's storage settings. And here you can look at any files that you might want to delete to try and free up some more space. And the reason for all this is that recording ProRes videos takes up much more space on your device than regular compressed video. And recording at 60 frames per second or 120 frames per second in ProRes isn't actually possible. You're going to need to record to an external fast SSD via the iPhone's USB-C port. Now, Apple Log is basically designed mainly for those who want to edit and then color grade their footage later. So it captures video in this low contrast, flat look that's kind of washed out. But what it does is it keeps this extra detail in both the bright and the dark parts of the image. And the difference is that this looks all washed out and horrible, whereas normally when you shoot video, obviously it's designed to look good straight away as soon as you film it. So you're not going to use this setting for videos that you want to share straight out of the camera. But when you're editing them later on, just like I talked about with the RAW setting for photographs, you're going to have more flexibility when adjusting colors and contrast. So basically just think of Apple Log as giving you more creative freedom to play around with your video in the edit. And that's great for anybody who wants their videos to look a little bit more cinematic or professional. So to record Apple Log with the iPhone native camera app, you'll first need to enable ProRes recording. Now you can actually record Apple Log with smaller files, but then you're going to need to use the free Blackmagic camera app or another app that allows it. I always just talk about the Blackmagic one because it's free, but others also provide this, but they're not necessarily free. And so Blackmagic gives you more options when you're choosing the color spaces and video formats. So you could shoot Apple Log in the H.265 codec, which is more compressed, but at least you're going to get log in smaller files, and you're not going to have these massive ProRes files, but you're not also going to have as much information to work with. It's all about compromising and working out which level of information you actually need. Now, if you want to understand things like Apple Log and using LUTs, it can be complicated, but I've kind of simplified it to try and explain it to people who are not like, full-time professional video creators. So I've got these lessons that are dedicated to this subject over on my Patreon. Again, links in the description. Check it out if you're interested. So the iPhone 17 Pro and Pro Max can record Apple ProRes RAW, which is like the next level up from ProRes. And as well, they also support OpenGate filming and Apple Log 2, which is the newer version of Apple Log, a sort of more advanced version. Before you can record Apple ProRes RAW, you're going to need two things. First, you can't shoot this format using the regular camera app, so you're going to need to use a camera app that supports ProRes RAW. Simplest option is just to download Final Cut Camera 2.0, but you're going to get a much better experience if you use the Blackmagic camera app, which I say is free and it has many more features. And the second thing that you need to do is to connect your iPhone to an external SSD. So what is ProRes RAW and how is it different to regular ProRes? So if we put it simply, ProRes, the regular ProRes, compresses video frames after image processing, which means the image data is baked in. So therefore things like white balance and ISO are fixed during capture and they cannot be changed later. ProRes RAW, on the other hand, compresses sensor data before image processing, which means that you can adjust things like white balance and ISO when you're editing later. So there's two versions. We've got ProRes RAW and we've got ProRes RAW HQ. The HQ version uses less compression, but that results in higher data rates, so larger files, but it is a little bit higher quality. But you might not even notice the difference, to be honest. It's a bit like the lossless and the lossy RAW photo files. The main camera can record ProRes RAW in up to 4K, up to 120 frames per second, but the ultra-wide and the telephoto cameras are limited to 60 frames per second. So the selfie camera and the digital crop lenses cannot record in ProRes RAW. Now, recording ProRes RAW actually disables stabilization in the camera, so you really need to use a tripod or a gimbal to avoid shaky footage. And I think the best gimbal for this purpose is actually the Insta360 Flow 2 Pro, because you can add the SSD without it sort of interfering with the arms of the gimbal. So that's the one that I found works better because it allows you to add an SSD, whereas the Hohem iSteady M7 doesn't allow you to connect a external SSD easily. You can do it, but it's just not as easy. Now that said, even gimbals don't produce 100% smooth video, so you might need to add some stabilization when you're editing. Now in camera settings, you're going to see a record sound setting. By default, this is set to spatial audio. And with this on, when you record a video, the audio is going to be captured using Apple's spatial audio technology. And this means that you can use the iPhone's audio mix feature. And this audio mix feature, it allows you to adjust and enhance the audio in your recorded videos after capturing them. So this feature uses machine learning and it allows you to clean the audio in 3 different styles. So if we open the Photos app and then select the video that we want to edit, tap the settings button, so tap audio, you're going to see these 4 options. So we've got standard, which is the default, unless you recorded using cinematic mode. And in that case, this is going to be set to cinematic by default. So standard is just the regular processing that we get with previous models of the iPhone. In frame, adjust the audio to focus on the audio that's coming from people within the frame, but you're still going to get some background noise. Studio tries to mimic the audio quality of a studio recording, so it's like kind of professionally recorded, like a podcast, for example. So that means it's going to try to remove all background noise, but I think you'll probably still get some. And Cinematic aims to replicate the audio experience of watching a movie in the theatre. So that means basically enhancing the voices, but at the same time it's going to maintain these ambient sounds as well. So you can select one of these, and then you can use the intensity slider, and that's going to adjust how much of the effect you want to apply. And these effects do tend to make your voice sound a little bit synthetic, so you can adjust things here and try to get the best balance between a kind of synthy voice and then lowering the background noise to a sort of comfortable level. Sometimes if you try to remove too much background noise and it gets too synthy, and then the voice sounds horrible. So this audio mix feature is actually only available for videos that are recorded with spatial audio and using the inbuilt microphones. So if you use an external microphone, when you edit the video, there's not going to be any audio mix option here. And that's actually a good way to detect whether your iPhone has detected the external mic and is using the external mic and not using the internal mics. If you do a little quick recording, open it in the Photos app and check to see if this audio mix is available. And if it's not, then you can be pretty sure that the iPhone is now using the external microphone. So if we go back into the record sound setting and then tap that, there's more options here. And if you'd rather not use this spatial audio, you can just switch to regular mono or stereo. And we've got two other switches here. So the first enables you to listen to audio while you record video. And the second is going to apply a wind noise reduction effect, which is going to be a little bit similar to the audio mix feature, except that you can't customize it. It's just on or off. In the camera settings, you can toggle on grid. Now, when you open the camera, you've got 4 lines across the screen. And this grid is going to help you to compose photos and videos by applying what's known as the rule of thirds. So it's actually quite simple to use. You just place objects of interest at the intersections of the lines. Put your horizon here, or you can put it here. So below grid, we have this level switch. And if we put this on, we're now going to get a little line in the middle of the screen, which shows you if your camera is level. And with this on, if you hold the iPhone camera facing down, you now get these 2 crosses in the middle, a white one and a yellow one. And when you get these 2 crosses to align, then you know that your iPhone is perfectly level. Now in camera settings, scroll down and make sure the portraits in photo mode switch is enabled. Now when we take a photo of someone in regular photo mode, the camera captures the depth information, which then allows us to add this blurry background afterwards. So take a photo and then open the photo in the Photos app, tap the settings button and then tap the portrait button, which is this circle with an F. And we can now use the slider to add however much background blur that we want. Now try moving your camera around and pay attention to the color. Do you notice the color changing slightly? Like, for example, brown wood goes a little bit more bluish and things like that. So that's because white balance is changing automatically. And most professionals will set white balance and lock it before they press the record button. And that's because if it keeps changing during a shot, it's going to look a bit messy and a bit unprofessional. And it's also going to make it harder to correct it when you're editing. So iPhones now have a setting which allows us to lock white balance. So just go into the record video menu, swipe down and then switch on lock white balance. And this means that white balance is going to be set automatically, but as soon as we press the record button, the white balance setting is going to be locked. So this just means that it's not going to change during the shot. When we stop recording, the iPhone then restarts the auto white balance until we press record again. But that just means that each shot within the shot itself, the white balance is going to be locked and it's not going to be changing throughout the shot. So that's it for now. And just want to say a big thank you to everybody who's bought a copy of one of my books. There's a trilogy out there now on Amazon. I never get tired of saying thank you because it's always a big thrill to me just to know that somebody has bought one of my books. And I do hope that it's out there in the world helping you to make better videos. Until next time.